Russia is preparing for a new war. Shock! Moscow is building military bases, and these are not just fortifications, but preparations for an offensive. EU intelligence is sounding the alarm. The Kremlin might decide to invade one of the Nato countries. Who is in the crosshairs? What will happen if Putin heads north? And is the world really on the brink of a new world war? We'll tell you right now.
New barracks and thousands of recruits. Putin is preparing for another war.
For this, those special support tools I mentioned are being invented. Well, I repeat, maintaining investments at the previous level will not be easy.
Russia is strengthening its military presence on the borders with Europe.
Putin has not achieved any significant results. With his own propaganda machine on the domestic front, he might sell some constructs that strengthen his power, but overall, the weakness of the West, the weak position of the USA, and the unwillingness, yes, to defend the positions that have been repeatedly stated in Washington's foreign policy doctrines. All this provokes Putin, who has expanded his army, who has shifted the economy to a military footing, who today, yes, has tightened the screws as much as possible within his own state. So he obviously sees weakened Europe as a weaker target than Ukraine.
In Petrozavodsk, approximately 160 kilometers from Finland, Russian military forces are expanding bases to create a new army command. Western analysts and intelligence believe that these forces are preparing for a possible conflict with NATO, writes the Wall Street Journal.
First and foremost, attention should be paid to the construction of the railway along the borders with NATO countries. This primarily includes Finland and Norway, and accordingly Estonia. This indicates that the Russian Federation is seriously considering the possibility of relocating both personnel and heavy armored vehicles directly to permanent deployment points on the borders with NATO countries. In other words, the Russian Federation is currently improving the logistical component in the relocation of military units directly to the NATO borders.
As noted by the publication, it is specifically to the Leningrad military district, which borders Estonia, Latvia and Finland, that the majority of new troops will be transferred as part of the increase in troop numbers to 1.5 million people. Small brigades will triple in size and become divisions with a strength of 10,000 people.
Military units are being prepared to not only on the borders with the Baltic countries and Finland, but also accordingly within the Russian Federation. The possibility, one of the so-called Suwalki scenario, is being considered, which involves an invasion of Polish territory and several Baltic countries to connect the Russian enclave of the Kaliningrad region with Belarus via a land corridor approximately 100 kilometers long.
The pace of military equipment production also indicates that Russia will be ready for war again in some time.
Military expenditures have been increased in the Russian Federation. At the moment, they have exceeded 6% of GDP. These are significant indicators that enable the Russian Federation not only to mobilize human resources, but primarily to shift the Russian economy onto a war footing. This involves increasing the production of artillery shells, munitions, and heavy armored vehicles.
Also, over the past 3 years, the aggressor country has been consistently increasing the number of conscripts, raising their maximum age. This year, the Kremlin dictator announced the largest conscription in the past 14 years.
The number of conscripts is approximately 100, so-called 60,000. This is practically the first step towards implementing Putin's plans to increase the personnel of the armed forces of the Russian Federation to 1.5 million.
In February, Danish intelligence warned that the Kremlin might start a large-scale war in Europe within 5 years, if it considers the North Atlantic Alliance to be weak.
The main weakness is the position of the United States of America, right? After World War II, a position was formed in which the USA presented itself as the main global policeman and a hegemon state that extends its military power to all allies. And in principle, to a large extent, the American military machine and army were the guarantors for the cause of stability on the continent, since there were no states ready to challenge the United States of America. But with Trump's second term as president, the rhetoric changed very harshly, and now Europe's security is, well, let's say, being handed over to European politicians.
Putin might try to test NATO's cohesion or Daesh by invading a small alliance country. For example, Estonia, where a certain number of ethnic Russians live.
Apparently, the Estonian city of Narva, the city is 90% Russian-speaking, and the Russian Federation is trying to use this factor to destabilize the situation in the border region. Narva is separated from the Russian border by essentially a border river, and at the moment the main efforts of both the Leningrad military district and accordingly Russian special services are focused on this direction with the aim of destabilizing the situation in the border regions.
According to experts' forecasts, a large-scale war with NATO could begin in 7 to 10 years. Earlier in Germany, it was suggested that the summer of 2025 might be the last peaceful one in Europe. According to a German historian, Russia might attack Lithuania as early as autumn.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now. 100 days of Trump, 100 days of chaos. America is in shock. The US leader is on the verge of impeachment. The scandalous proposal is already in Congress. And this is just the beginning. The country's Vice President Vance is threatening the entire world. Negotiations are on the verge of collapse. Could Trump really withdraw from any agreements on Ukraine? And are Americans truly ready to remove Trump by force? Watch the report for all the details.
Impeachment for Trump. Due to Trump's overconfident policies that disregard the US Constitution, the court and Congress, a congressman from Michigan has submitted a proposal to impeach the current US president.
Regarding the congressman who once again proposed Trump's impeachment, there probably isn't a significant threat to the 47th American president. And essentially, this is part of the political struggle and political life, which is generally characterized by such actions.
As a result, Trump set a record. But it's too early to celebrate, as the approval rating of the US president after 100 days in office is the lowest of any US president in the last 70 years. Although Trump himself believes that this is all fake, and that his administration is performing better than ever before.
To cite specific examples, after Dwight Eisenhower, he is the second president in 80 years whose rating has dropped so sharply. But if we delve deeper into the details, we can notice that this gap and the decrease in his support are more related to Democratic voters or neutral voters.
Meanwhile, in Europe and Ukraine, there are fears that Trump might use minor progress in negotiations as a pretext to claim that his work is done and withdraw from peace talks with Kyiv and Moscow.
Americans have repeatedly stated their potential withdrawal. Both Rubio and Trump himself have done this. And first of all, it should be understood that such statements are made to increase the level of pressure on Ukraine and Europe, because in general, these points of the so-called peace agreement fully meet Russian demands. And often Western European diplomats ask questions to the Americans. Yes, and what is the nature of the emergence of such points in principle?
That's when Vance decided to add fuel to the fire by talking about nuclear escalation. The Vice President of the United States is convinced that Ukraine will not be able to win the war with Russia.
I think there is a strange idea in the mainstream media that if this goes on for a few more years, the Russians will collapse, the Ukrainians will regain their territory, and everything will return to how it was before the war. But that's not the reality we live in.
Moreover, he does not rule out the scenario of nuclear escalation from Russia.
Both Trump himself and the speakers around him are very eager to escalate the confrontation and present themselves as the main peacemakers, the people who can stop Paco death by demonstrating such fear and intimidation of their own allies with Russian nuclear weapons, Vance directly gives them carte blanche to use precisely this tool and mechanism in achieving Russia's geopolitical goals.
As for the supposed ceasefire from May 8th to 11th, which Putin announced, the White House's reaction was not long in coming.
Trump wants to see a permanent ceasefire. I understand that this morning, Putin proposed a temporary ceasefire. The president has made it clear that he is aiming for a permanent ceasefire. First and foremost, to stop the killings, to end the bloodshed.
But knowing Putin, is it even worth expecting any ceasefire during these days?
There is no goodwill, no gestures in Putin's so-called truce on May 9th. And it was very appropriate in this context that both Sybiga and Zelensky responded to him, saying, why wait if you can start, for example, a truce from May 1st. But the Russians are not interested in either a truce or a peace process. They are trying to use, Trump's desire to end the war at any cost to achieve their own goals.
Meanwhile, Macron is rushing to the rescue. The president of France stated that the next 2 weeks will be decisive, because within 8 to 10 days, international pressure on Russia will be increased to try to stop the war in Ukraine. And already tonight, France has initiated a UN Security Council meeting.